Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been collecting hockey cards since I was a kid. My dad used to bring them home every Friday after work, and we'd sit at the kitchen table opening packs together. Even though he passed away last year, I've kept the tradition going. These days, I get my weekly fix at that famous Canadian coffee shop chain. You know, the one named after the hockey legend known for his donuts. Their cards aren't the highest quality, but they remind me of those Friday nights with Dad. It had been a rough week at the hospital where I work as an emergency room nurse. 12-hour night shifts can really wear you down, and I was looking forward to my simple pleasures: a hot tea, a Boston cream donut, and hopefully some good luck with my hockey cards. I pulled up to the drive-through speaker, already anticipating the moment I get to open that pack of cards in my car. I started to order my extra large tea with 2 milk, but before I could finish, the drive-through worker curtly interrupted me and told me to drive up. I paused for a moment, caught off guard by the abrupt interruption. After 5 years of working in the emergency room, I'd learned that sometimes the best way to deal with rudeness is to let people create their own problems. So I simply drove up to the window as instructed. A young worker with a clearly annoyed expression was waiting at the window. They quickly told me my total of $2.50. I explained that I wasn't finished with my order and still wanted a Boston cream donut and a pack of hockey cards. The worker's face twisted into a scowl. They berated me, saying I should have mentioned this at the speaker. When I explained that I had tried but was interrupted, they complained about having to void the transaction and re-enter everything, accusing me of holding up the line. I calmly explained that I'd assumed they couldn't hear me when they told me to drive up, so I thought I'd finish my order at the window. The worker huffed and started aggressively typing on their register. That's when their supervisor walked over, noticing the tension. The supervisor asked if everything was all right. The worker immediately complained about me, claiming I hadn't completed my order at the speaker and was now adding more items. I explained the situation, telling the supervisor that I had been interrupted while ordering. The supervisor's expression shifted from concern to understanding. They apologized and mentioned they'd received several similar complaints about customers being interrupted lately. Turning to the worker, the supervisor reminded them about their previous discussions regarding letting customers complete their orders. The worker's face turned red, and they avoided eye contact while finishing my transaction. The supervisor personally handed me my order and apologized again, offering an extra pack of cards for free. I thanked them sincerely for their consideration. When I drove away, I smiled when I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the supervisor pulling the worker aside for what appeared to be a serious conversation. I parked in the lot and opened my first pack of cards, pulled a rare autographed card. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. Later that week, I noticed the same worker was no longer at the drive-thru window. Instead, they were inside cleaning tables, and a much friendlier voice greeted me at the speaker, letting me finish my entire order without interruption. I guess some people do learn their lessons after all. I've been a doctor at Central Hospital for 15 years now, and I've seen my fair share of difficult situations, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened 6 months ago. It's taken me this long to even process everything that occurred, and now I feel ready to share this story. It all started when an elderly patient was admitted to our intensive care unit with severe pneumonia and heart complications. She was 78 years old and, as I learned later, came from old money, the kind of money that tears families apart. And boy, did it ever. I was doing my rounds when one of our nurses, let's call her Karen, burst into the ICU like a tornado. I knew her from the emergency department, and she had a reputation for being difficult. But this was different. Her face was really red, and she was practically shaking. Karen demanded to know why she hadn't been told about this admission. When I asked what the problem was, she revealed that the patient was her aunt, who she blamed for her mother dying penniless while living in luxury herself. I tried to maintain professionalism, but Karen was already causing a scene. She proceeded to tell anyone who would listen about how her aunt had manipulated her grandfather into changing his will 15 years ago, leaving most of his fortune to her instead of Karen's mother. She went on ranting about how her mother was her grandfather's firstborn and deserved that inheritance. She accused her aunt of playing nursemaid to him in his final years and convincing him that they didn't care enough. When I reminded her that regardless of her personal history, the woman was now our patient and required immediate care, Karen flat out refused. She called her aunt a parasite who had lived off other people's money her whole life and suggested she should taste some karma. My head nurse stepped in and told Karen she had no choice in the matter as she was assigned to this wing today and would need to perform her duties professionally. Karen challenged this authority, asking what would happen if she refused. I had to step in and warn her about facing disciplinary action, emphasizing that her personal feelings had no place here. She stormed off. The next day, our patient's condition suddenly deteriorated. Her blood pressure dropped dangerously, and she developed symptoms that didn't align with her original condition. Something felt off, and I ordered immediate blood work and a toxicology screen. The results were shocking. We found traces of multiple medications that weren't prescribed, a combination that could have been lethal. I immediately ordered a review of our security footage. The cameras caught Karen accessing the medication room at odd hours and then entering our patient's room when she thought no one was watching. But what truly chilled me was when we expanded our investigation. This wasn't her first time. Over the past 3 years, there had been several suspicious cases where patients experienced unexpected complications. The common denominator? They were all elderly patients from wealthy backgrounds, and Karen had been their assigned nurse. I called security immediately and contacted the hospital administration. Within hours, the police were involved. When they confronted Karen, she completely lost it. She started screaming about how all these patients deserved what she did to them, ranting about them living off inherited wealth while good people struggled. She mentioned how her mother had worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school, while these parasites just sat on their money. When the police officer pointed out that she had just confessed to multiple counts of attempted murder, Karen became even more agitated. She insisted they weren't murder attempts, but rather her delivering justice, claiming these people had never worked a day in their lives. I reminded her about the oath she took to care for patients, regardless of who they are. This only made her more furious. She lashed out at me, telling me to spare her my self-righteous lecture, saying I had no idea what it was like to watch my mother die in a shabby apartment while her own sister lived in a mansion. The investigation revealed that she had attempted to harm 6 other patients over the years. Each time she had carefully selected medications that would worsen their conditions while appearing natural. She had gotten away with it because no one suspected a nurse would intentionally harm patients. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Not only did they have her on camera, but they also found detailed notes in her phone about each patient she targeted, including research on what medications would cause the most damage, while raising minimal suspicion. The judge showed no mercy. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Her nursing license was permanently revoked, and she was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. During the trial, it came out that Karen's version of the inheritance story was completely twisted. Her aunt had actually offered to share the inheritance with Karen's mother, but her mother had refused out of pride. The aunt had even tried to help financially several times over the years, but Karen's mother had blocked all contact. The aunt recovered, thankfully. When she learned what had happened, she didn't press additional charges. Instead, she set up a foundation to help fund education for nursing students from underprivileged backgrounds, specifically focusing on medical ethics and patient care. Last I heard, Karen's been writing angry letters from prison to anyone who will listen, still claiming she was justified in her actions. The psychiatric evaluation diagnosed her with severe narcissistic personality disorder and an obsession with perceived injustice. The whole incident led to our hospital implementing stricter monitoring systems for medication dispensing and random audits of patient care. It also sparked a national conversation about screening processes for healthcare workers and the importance of psychological evaluations. Sometimes I still can't believe it happened in our hospital, under our watch. It shows you never really know what someone is capable of when they let bitterness consume them completely. I spent 8 years working as an administrative assistant while putting myself through design school. It wasn't easy juggling work and studies, but I had a clear goal: breaking into the interior design industry. When I finally graduated, I was over the moon. After weeks of job hunting, I found what seemed like the perfect opportunity: an operations assistant position at a boutique interior design firm. During the interview, my soon-to-be boss seemed impressed by my combination of administrative experience and fresh design degree. She offered me $22 an hour as an independent contractor, which wasn't great, but I was willing to take it to get my foot in the door. I even turned down a better-paying office manager position because this seemed like my chance to transition into design. The first few weeks went smoothly. I handled client coordination, organized the sample library, and assisted with basic design tasks. Then came the warehouse sale. My boss told me I needed to work that Saturday for the warehouse sale. When I agreed but asked if I would be paid at my regular hourly rate or overtime, she immediately shut me down, saying I wouldn't be paid at all because it was a company event. I reminded her that I was hired as an hourly contractor and should be compensated for extra hours. That's when she dropped the bomb, claiming I was actually considered salary now and that none of them got paid extra for these events. When I pointed out this was the first I'd heard of being salaried and that my offer letter clearly stated I was hourly, she just brushed it off, saying that's how they did things there and everyone had to pitch in. After that conversation, things got worse. She started texting me at all hours asking for updates and demanding I come in early for quick meetings before my shift. When I mentioned getting paid for this extra time, she'd get defensive. She would lecture me about being a team player, pointing out that the other designers never complained about putting in extra hours. I tried explaining that the other designers were salaried employees making significantly more than me, while I was a contractor being paid hourly. Her response was just to tell me that if I wanted to succeed in this industry, I needed to show more dedication. I finally decided to go over her head and texted the owner. I asked for clarification about my employment status, explaining that I was hired as an hourly contractor, but my boss was now saying I was salaried and expecting unpaid work outside my 9 to 5 hours. I requested confirmation of my status, but the owner never responded. The next morning, my boss called me into her office first thing. She said we needed to discuss my performance. When I asked what the problem was, she told me my time management skills weren't meeting their standards and that they were letting me go, effective immediately. I protested that this was the first I was hearing of any issues with my performance and asked if this was because I had questioned payment for extra hours. Her only response was to tell me to pack my things and leave the premises, saying they would mail my final check. I was stunned. No warnings, no performance improvement plan, nothing. Just fired right before the holidays with rent due. But that wasn't the end of the story. I contacted a labor lawyer who practically lit up when I explained my situation. Turns out they had misclassified me as a 1099 contractor when I should have been an employee based on how they controlled my work. The lawyer also pointed out that firing someone for asking about wage issues is textbook retaliation. We filed complaints with both the State Labor Board and the Internal Revenue Service. The Labor Board investigation revealed that they had done this to several other contractors before me. The IRS audit was the cherry on top. They ended up owing significant back taxes and penalties for misclassifying employees. 3 months later, I received a settlement that covered my unpaid wages, overtime, and wrongful termination. The company had to revamp their entire employment structure and pay substantial fines. My former boss was demoted from her management position. One of the clients I had worked with heard about what happened and offered me a junior designer position at their firm. Properly salaried this time with clear expectations and legitimate employment status. Sometimes standing up for yourself works out better than you'd expect. It had been a rough morning at work. As a nurse working the night shift at the local hospital, I was absolutely exhausted after dealing with a particularly difficult patient who kept demanding special treatment all night. All I wanted was to grab some lunch at my favorite diner before heading home to crash. The diner's always packed during lunch hour, which usually doesn't bother me since I'm there during off-peak times. But today my shift ran longer than usual because my replacement called in sick, so here I was, circling the crowded parking lot at peak lunch hour. I finally found a spot after about 10 minutes of searching. The food was worth the wait though. Their club sandwich always hits different after a long night shift. I took my time eating, trying to decompress from the stressful night. After finishing my meal, I stepped out into the parking lot, ready to head home and get some much-needed sleep. That's when I saw him, this guy in a shiny black sports car, entering the lot. We made eye contact and I could see the desperate look in his eyes, scanning for any signs of someone leaving. But what happened next made my blood boil. Instead of slowing down when he saw me in the road, this jerk actually sped up, coming within a foot of hitting me. I had to jump back to avoid getting clipped by his side mirror. He was clearly racing to get to whatever spot would open up next, and he didn't care if he ran someone over in the process. My car was parked at the very end of the loop, and I could see him in my peripheral vision, crawling along trying to figure out which car was mine. When I got closer to my car, I saw him flip his turn signal on, basically claiming my spot before I even got in my car. That's when I decided this guy needed a lesson in patience and basic human decency. I got into my car, pulled out my phone, and started pretending to be completely absorbed in whatever was on my screen. Through my rearview mirror, I could see him waiting, his entitled face getting redder by the second. He started honking his horn, yelling at me to move it. I just kept scrolling on my phone, acting completely oblivious. Getting more frustrated, he rolled down his window and shouted across the lot, demanding to know if I was leaving or not. I continued ignoring him, though I was struggling to hide my smirk. After about a minute of this, which probably felt like an eternity to him, he threw his hands up in exasperation and peeled off to continue his loop around the lot, tires screeching slightly. That's when I saw an older sedan approaching, driven by what looked like a tired mom with two kids in the back. Perfect timing. I started my car, backed out carefully, and waved the mom in. She gave me the biggest smile and thank you wave. As she was pulling into my spot, I caught sight of the sports car guy watching from the other end of the lot. He was banging his steering wheel in frustration, and I could see him yelling something in his car. As I was pulling out of the lot, I saw another car leaving from a spot right next to where he had originally stopped to wait for mine. If he had just been patient and kept driving instead of trying to intimidate me, he would have gotten an even better spot. I drove home with the biggest grin on my face. I've been the head of our neighborhood association for 6 years. My husband and I moved here after his promotion at his tech company, and we immediately fell in love with this diverse community. The houses range from modern minimalist designs to classic colonials, which is exactly what makes our neighborhood special. Everything was perfect until about 3 months ago when she moved in. The previous owners of the mansion at the end of our cul-de-sac had relocated to Europe, and suddenly this woman appeared acting like she owned the place. Quite literally. From day one, she made her presence known. I was watering my garden when she walked up to my driveway. She introduced herself as my new neighbor and immediately started listing changes she wanted in the neighborhood. When I asked what she had in mind, she launched into complaints about noise. She explained that since she worked from home, she needed complete silence. She demanded no children playing outside during business hours and insisted on banning all parties and music. When I tried explaining this wasn't feasible given our many families with young children, she interrupted to complain about house colors. She hated the yellow house across the street and announced she was drafting new color guidelines. Everything had to be beige, cream, or light gray. I tried explaining that, as a head of the association, I couldn't enforce such rules, but she took off, declaring she'd handle it herself. Over the next few weeks, things got bizarre. She began bribing everyone's gardeners and housekeepers to spy on residents. My housekeeper told me she'd been offered $200 weekly to accidentally leave gates open or misplace mail. She even photographed children playing outside and sent threatening letters about noise violations to their parents. Things reached a breaking point when she announced she was running for head of the neighborhood association, spreading rumors about financial mismanagement. That's when I decided to investigate. I contacted the previous owners in Europe who told me they'd never sold the house. It was still on the market. They had no idea who this woman was. The police arrived during one of her campaign meetings. When they told her to come with them, she became indignant, boasting about owning the biggest house in the neighborhood. I stepped in to inform her that she didn't own anything here. The look on her face when they handcuffed her was so satisfying. Turns out she was wanted in 3 other counties for similar schemes, moving into vacant properties, trying to take over neighborhood associations, and embezzling funds. They found stolen items, fake documents, and even a manual she'd written about how to take over rich neighborhoods. She is now facing multiple charges of fraud, breaking and entering, and harassment. The neighborhood has been much quieter since she left, but the good kind of quiet, not her kind. We even threw a massive block party to celebrate her arrest. And yes, we let the kids play outside as much as they want. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.